is now 10:10 and November 10th, 2018. I call the ad hoc MPO committee meeting to order. First item of business, welcome, Jack. I'm glad you're back. Welcome, members, and we have an audience today. So thank you for coming. And Ryan, thank you for coming in today. So, and also I believe our captain will be in here too shortly too. Item number 2. Go ahead, Skip. Do we have a quorum? Yes, we do have I determine we have a quorum present. So, thank you. Keep me on track, Skip, please. Okay. Item number 2. Discuss and approve the minutes of the October 27th, 2018 meeting. Does everyone have a copy of the meeting, and has everyone had a chance to review the copy of that meeting? Okay. Any discussion? Well, first of all, do we want to go ahead and formalize the motion on this and motion to discuss? Okay.
These are my notes. I have no idea exactly how accurate they are, but they're the best I can do. And Minnie has looked them over with the video. So.
Okay. I call for a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Okay. Second. Okay. Bernard. Discussion.
Call for the vote.
Okay. Any discussion? I see we have some reviewing going on here, so just let's give it a second here. I'll say I have reviewed the minutes, and I believe they're accurate as written. So if there's no discussion, call for the vote. All in favor? Okay, Skip, are you in favor? Okay, passed unanimously. Thank you, Skip, for doing those too. I appreciate that. Item number 3, discuss and possible action on the MPO congestion management call for projects. Since we do have this for possible action, I guess we need a motion.
Say again?
Since we do have this as being possible action, I guess we need a motion.
No, actually, we haven't got possible action yet because we haven't suggested what the action might be.
Okay,
so
fair enough.
It's really hard to make a motion. So I think the first thing to do is just go ahead and let me talk about it a little bit what I did.
Right. And go ahead, Skip. I know you've done some research on that, so please go ahead and bring it forward. Does anybody any questions or any comments on that? Okay, Skip, please go ahead. Thank you.
I went and looked at the minutes of the last planning board, the MPO planning board, and they have in there a series of proposals, including calls for projects on the congestion management and pollution control program. They've issued a call for projects. I passed around by email last week a copy of the congestion management plan, the program that the MPO has published, and everybody should have had a copy of that in your email box during the week sometime. I did not put all of the details on the call for projects because there's a good deal, it's mostly just detail about how to file one. The fact is that if we're going to file a congestion management project, we have to have a couple of people, probably 2 anyway, attend their orientation program in January or February. I think it's January 19th. But in order for us to be able to submit one, we'll have to attend that. What I don't know for certain is whether we can submit it and not be a provider of services with regard to that particular project. I think we can, but the call for projects obviously is intended for people who are going to do the work to make a proposal. So I think what we probably ought to consider doing is to, when we get down to discuss projects that we're going to do, we need to look at that project and see if it falls into the congestion management program, and if it does, then we probably need to vote to attend that orientation program. The call for projects is still underway, so the call for projects won't actually go out for another month or so. And then there'll be an orientation in January or early February for those people who are going to submit a response to the call for projects.
Thank you, Skip. We have the opportunity, and I want to make sure everybody on this committee is aware of it. We have Ms. Jeannie Geiger here today, and she is actually the Deputy Director for the MPO, and her specialty, as I understand it, is the acceptance or shepherding of the plans through the MPO committee, if that's correct. If we may have the latitude to diverge, I would love to let her share some of her thoughts and maybe have a little bit of dialogue, because it does dovetail in exactly what you're trying to do here, Skip.
Sure.
And if we may, is there any way you could kind of share with us what how we work through submitting the plan, what the opportunities are, exactly what Skip was addressing as far as the training that may be required, and I think you're on, so just if you don't mind, and thank you so much for being here.
Is it on? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I don't need this because I'm right here. There's I'm sorry?
Yeah, Ms. Geiger, we're recording this, and so the reason we want anything on a mic is so, because we may have an audience that could be watching us, so.
Oh, is this being live streamed?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you kidding?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, then I will behave.
Mhm.
Jeannie Geiger, Castle Hills resident, 88 Blewett Lane, for over 28 and a half years. Deputy Director at the MPO for about 16 years, and yes, this is kind of what I do. I didn't realize that y'all were going to be talking about the congestion mitigation and air quality call for projects, as opposed to our STPMM call for projects, but that's fine. I can talk about both. The congestion mitigation and air quality funding source has come about because Bexar County has been designated non-attainment. We would rather forego the funding and not have the non-attainment designation. Believe me, the funding is not worth the hassle of non-attainment ever. Don't let anybody ever tell you otherwise. This is a new funding source for us, so yes, that
A
workshop.
quick question. I'm sorry. What is non-attainment? Can you describe what that state
I
means?
certainly can. The National Ambient Air Quality Standards, there are certain thresholds for pollutants, volatile organic compounds, nitrous oxides, et cetera. We have been on the verge of being designated non-attainment since the 1990s. It really could have happened in 2000 if Al Gore had been elected. But we survived not being designated all this time. And in fact, the only reason Bexar County was designated non-attainment is that the EPA lowered the threshold from 75 parts per billion to 70 parts per billion. We were achieving that old standard of 75, but in October 2015, EPA lowered it to the 70, and Bexar County is not meeting that standard. So it's not that our air quality is by any means getting worse, it's just a lowering of a standard.
Ms. Geiger, that's an ozone, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. So this is a new funding source. So we are, as MPO staff, we're plotting through this one for the first time. That workshop that the councilman talked about, we haven't set the date yet. It's January or February, sometime in early 2019. That is a workshop will be a partnership with TxDOT, the folks up in Austin. So we do need, it's all about coordinating dates that we can have somebody who knows more about this program that we do can come down and provide more assistance on eligible project types and so forth. The big difference between this call for projects and the one that Castle Hills has applied for a couple of times already is this one is geared towards emissions reductions, and that will not be an easy process to do. We are going to require the emissions reductions calculations with all the projects that are submitted. There are standard spreadsheets that the Federal Highway Administration uses, and those are the standards for Texas. So we will use those standard spreadsheets, and we will ask all submitting agencies to submit those emissions reductions calculations with each project. The funding source is all about obviously being able to to make our air quality better. So added capacity projects or adding travel lanes will not be eligible projects. Things like pedestrian sidewalks, bike lanes, transit programs, those kinds of things are eligible. Intersection improvements, grade separations, intelligent transportation systems are eligible. Added capacity is not, and we are going to ask our board to also not allow reductions in roadway capacity. You know, taking, like for example, I'll use West Avenue as an example. By Antonian, 2 lanes each direction, center turn lane, but to not take that down to 1 lane each direction with a center turn lane and wide sidewalks. So to not reduce the capacity of a roadway, along with not allowing added capacity projects. So that's the basics of it. Our board will be taking, Technical Advisory Committee will be taking action on the proposed schedule and process at their meeting on December 12th and December 7th, and our board on December 10th. And then that call for projects would formally start December 12th. Submittals would be due April 1st. And then we would have a multi-agency group score the projects. We do public involvement, get public input on the public's opinion on the projects. And then our board will be taking action on the project selection in the July-August timeframe. That's the schedule in a nutshell. The clincher, though, is going to be doing those, having the data to do the emissions reductions calculations. I might also say that I know there's a lot of interest from Castle Hills in the MPO funding. MPO funding is federal funding. It's not a grant program. It's a reimbursable process. The MPO only funds construction costs. They don't fund the environmental, the public involvement, the planning, the schematics, all of that kind of work. That is the responsibility of the implementing agency. When it's all said and done, then a project through the MPO is not really an 80-20 match, 80 federal, 20 local, but it really turns out to be more of a 50-50, 50 federal and 50 local, if you look at the total project cost. We have had some of the smaller cities, City of Helotes, City of Live Oak, after they've been awarded funding, say, oh, thank you, no, we don't want this, because it really is a burden to federalize a project. You can do more, faster, cheaper with local funds than you can federalizing a project. And then Brooks City Base has returned money also, just because in the long run, it was easier to it was better for them to just use local funding. So federal funding is not it's not the answer to all the problems. It comes with a lot of hoops to jump through, and sometimes just know that it's not always worth it.
Can I address a couple of issues? One of the things that I noticed in one of the intersections that we're really quite interested in is the 410 interchange at West and Jackson Keller, which is one of the 100 worst congested areas in the state, according to your figures. And I looked at, when I was looking at the overhead from Google Earth, they listed the bus stops. And I noticed that there must be a dozen bus stops right around those intersections, west to 410 from Jackson Keller, and Jackson Keller to 410 from west. There are about eight or a dozen right inside that little triangle, and 2 or 3 or 4 outside that little triangle. And if you're stopping buses there during congested traffic times, which I think VIA is doing, I think that's liable to cause a big increase in congestion, and because of the slowdown, it's going to cause an increase in air quality or problems. That's to say that because you've got a whole bunch of idling engines there, you're going to produce a lot of pollutants. And so I'm wondering if we found a way to reorganize the bus stops or to arrange them in a little different way, perhaps reduce one or two and combine one or two, and find some way to put in a bus turnoff, a bus pad, whether it be off main traffic lanes. Is that something that we could get cooperation to do from the MPO or from VIA, since the MPO is a big part of VIA is a big part of the MPO?
That would have to be something you'd bring up with VIA. I'm not sure, it sounds easy to say, oh, let's reorganize those stops, but you've got, the route, the 97 on West Avenue, you've got the 550, 551 on Loop 410 frontage road. I did 11 years at VIA, so I kind of got my transit stuff down too. And it's not so easy to just reorganize bus stops because if you're going to have them one direction, you have to have the stops coming back the other direction, and then you just have too many streets on there which have bus service. And I really don't think that kind of congestion with the bus stopping is really the huge problem, an air quality problem. And I don't know, sometimes bus pullouts might be a good idea, but I don't know that reorganizing all of the bus stops is feasible because they are serving completely
Well,
different routes.
certainly it's not feasible if you don't look at it. So
By all means, look at it, but
that's
work with VIA as you do so.
that's the question: is to whom do we address the question at VIA?
Okay, start with Leroy. Leroy.alloway@viainfo.net.
What's the guy's name?
Leroy Alloway, Alloway. He worked with us for about a year before he went to VIA, so that's why, why not?
And the website is
Leroy.alloway@viainfo.net.
.com,
And hit .net.
.net.
And he'll forward it to the right person. But yeah, that's a good place to start, because there are some people that do analysis. There are the other people that actually go out and install. So this is going to be more of a planning level at this point, I guess. So I would start with Leroy.
Second question, you had mentioned was it STM projects?
STPMM.
STPMM. Can you give us a little rundown on those?
As in, I'm sorry, I don't know what rundown means.
I'm sorry, you said that you mentioned that we were looking at this particular project, congestion management, air quality, versus the STMM. I wondered if that's a project that we might be interested in looking at.
The STPMM stands for Surface Transportation Program Metropolitan Mobility. Call it STPMM. It's also known as Category 7. It's also known as MPO funds. And then in the last transportation bill, it became known as Surface Transportation Block Grant. It's not a grant. Those are the most flexible funds that the MPO has. It's not tied to air quality, or specifically for bike and ped projects, or for added capacity, planning studies, operational projects, bike and ped, transit projects. It covers the whole gamut. And that's what the city has applied for back in 2012 or 13?
I think we had two projects that were approved in 2016, but they haven't yet been funded.
Sorry?
I think we have two projects that were approved or adopted, whatever the process is,
No.
but they've never been funded.
No, the projects were not approved. They were not recommended for funding. They did not get funded.
And these are the two projects that were submitted in 2018, or
17, I believe.
2017, right?
Yes.
Okay, and so one was more of a walkability-oriented project, one considered had sidewalks around the elementary school. Those two projects that we're referring to?
Right.
Okay.
There was one on West Avenue, maybe?
Yes, one's that is correct, and one was try to take care of some issues, honeysuckle, lemonwood, and those. So, but that's where you asked my question. I was curious the status of those projects, and so they're not going to move forward at this point, correct?
Right. They were not funded.
Okay, so they'd have to be resubmitted again if we wanted to from scratch.
And if I may ask a question, Ms. Geiger, the STPMM, do drainage issues fall under that category?
Drainage only as it's incidental to a project. It must be a transportation project, and
Okay.
then drainage as, it cannot be
Okay.
a drainage project to go in and put culverts and everything on.
Mhm.
It is drainage.
Only with the improvement of a roadway or something?
Probably like, maybe a percentage, total cost would be not to exceed maybe more than 15%,
I see.
federal guidelines.
Okay, thank you.
Back on those two projects again, is there any way possible to find out how we scored, or is there any way we could get some information on that?
Yes, I can provide how all the projects scored out. I don't remember how many we had, maybe 40 to 50
Mm-hmm.
projects. And remember, this isn't just Bear County, it's all of Bear, Comal, Guadalupe, and then about a third of Kendall County
Mm-hmm.
part.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of mobility needs. There's never enough funding.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So it's a pretty intensive competition for,
I ask, well, I think it'd be good as a city that we know how we scored, so we know what we need to improve on to better present our case going forward. And so, because we have a lot of needs in our city, and we all recognize that, and that's why we're here volunteering for this. And so, I'd like to see exactly where we stood, and maybe get an understanding of why we stood where we stood on these last two projects, if that would be possible. If you mind sharing that, that would be great. If you
I
could,
don't think they necessarily scored all that bad out of a 1,000-point system. Maybe they came in around the 700s.
okay,
So they weren't bad projects. It's
Okay.
just there's a lot of really good projects and a lot of, real needs.
okay. And that was determined by the technical committee, correct?
I'm sorry?
That was determined by the technical committee?
The scoring was done by a work group of the Technical Advisory Committee.
Okay.
That's only one component.
Okay,
The board takes into account the technical score, the public involvement
mm-hmm,
score, the project readiness.
mm-hmm,
Meaning, is a project just somebody's idea, and so
Right.
there's been no work done on it, or is it pretty close to being let? And then the agency's priorities.
okay,
So and there's no weight. It's not like one part of that is so much percent. It's completely flexible to give our board the most flexibility they need to select the projects that they
okay.
want to select.
You know, on that point, if you don't mind, if you could forward that information on to, I think Mr. Rappley may be the appropriate individual to send it to, and he could disseminate it out if that's reasonable.
Yeah, as long as I get an email address,
Okay,
I'm good.
that would be good. Ryan, do you mind following up on that, please? All right, thank you. And I thank you for allowing that and sharing that too, so.
Yeah, it's not like it's secret. We do, as soon as we get it done, it was up on our website throughout all of the public involvement process, because we do, we presented it we did 4 public meetings, 1 in each county. So we took a couple of boards with all the scores so everybody could see how their projects fell out. And then it's up on our website. And then it was up there, for several weeks then
Mhm.
after the whole process was done. So, it's not like it's a secret. It's not like nobody knew.
Yeah, no, and I was digging,
Publicly.
I was digging through the website here recently, and I couldn't find them, so,
Well,
and
it
that's
was over
why.
a year ago.
Right, and there's no,
been a
the
while, so
archiving data is not there, and so I was just, that's kind of why I'm curious, so.
No, it's
So,
no
but-
problem to.
Okay, beautiful, thank you.
Quick question. So were there any projects that are accepted that had a score in the 700 area that we did, that had perhaps more community involvement or more other things that are other than the technical score itself?
Oh, I don't remember offhand. I'd have to go back and look.
Thank you.
So does it help if you have more, if like when you submit something, if it's not just an idea, if you have like numbers to back it up, and if it's further along in the process?
Some work has been done on it. If you do have support from some of the other partners, whether it's VIA, VIA could do a letter of support or resolution support, or if it's something that would complement the TxDOT operational improvements that are, coming down in the San Pedro, and area, then it shows that there's coordination and collaboration and support kinds of things rather than somebody just having, a wild idea in the middle of the night.
Right. Okay. That helps. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions to Ms. Geiger?
I think that's about it from me.
Okay, well, I thank,
We'll sit here. If something else comes up, just
okay, and thank you so much for sharing, appreciate that.
Yeah, I want to thank you for coming out and spending your time on Saturday to come and spend some time with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. On agenda item 3, is there any additional discussion at this point as far as what Skip presented and Ms. Geiger shared with us? Okay, so this will move on to agenda item 4. Let's discuss some possible action on the traffic information from the Castle Hills Police Department. Chief Siemens, he already, and thank you for staying, Chief, I appreciate that. But he shared this information. It's in a raw form. Kind of hard to really dig into it. I think there's a method to the madness, if I can say it like that, as far as how the data is gathered. And I'd like Chief Siemens to go ahead and share that with us so we can understand better. Is that Mark?
Yeah, just just a quick question. It looked like that it was given to us in a PDF file format. It'd be nice if we could actually get in a spreadsheet format, so that way that folks like myself or other folks that might be so inclined can do calculations on it and that kind of stuff like that. Something that'd be pretty easy to import into.
That's no problem. We
spreadsheet.
store it in both formats, and
Perfect.
Mr. Squire had expressed the same interest last week as well, but what we got readily available was the PDF, so certainly we can do that for you.
Thank you, sir.
Just to give you a little, I guess, backstory to what we do and the philosophy behind these traffic studies, is that when we deploy the radar trailer itself to gather data and collect data, we do so on any given street in one direction for a 3-day period, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. As you can probably understand and gather, Monday and Fridays are kind of anomalies in that people take off or extend a weekend, and so those days are not good traffic study days because you get more inaccurate data than you do on the other days of the week. That's not to say that folks can't take off on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. It's just when you think about yourselves, when you take a day off, you don't usually take it in the middle of the week. If you can help it, you'd like to take it in conjunction with the weekend. So we throw out those anomalies, and we do our traffic studies Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, each direction on any particular street that we are studying at that time. This particular trailer is not the highest end trailer, but it does collect quite a bit of data for us. And to give you some context there, it'll collect the obvious total traffic count, average speeds above the posted speed limit, average speeds below, percentages above the speed limit, percentages below the speed limit. It will group the vehicles into 5-mile-an-hour allotments, and percentages within 30 to 35, 35 to 40, and so on. So we collect quite a bit of data, which is useful for us for a number of reasons, but that's really it in a nutshell. So if y'all have any more pointed questions or anything else I can elaborate on, I'd be happy to do so.
Yeah, I think one of our discussions was some of the data is most likely skewed, especially the speeds, especially probably the overspeeds, the over-the-limit speeds, and in that when people see a radar atom, they're going to slow down. I think it's just a natural human reaction. I mean, every time I see a car, I don't care if it's one of yours or San Antonio's, oh, you just get that. That's just, it's ingrained, I guess, after 40 years of driving. 40, ooh, no, not that long. 10 years of driving. Just kidding.
That's right. No, I would agree. Right. Certainly there's a deterrent factor, and with this particular radar trailer, it has red and blue lights that will flash at you if you're slightly over, and so that in and of itself will cause a knee-jerk reaction to tap the brakes or let off the accelerator, typically. Mm-hmm. But those numbers there, when you see those over-limit numbers, they're aggregated. It's whether you're a half a mile over, or let's call it what it is, 1 mile an hour over, or 25 mile an hour over. It's everybody that was over and then aggregated. Typically, we don't have a speeding issue. I'll say that first and foremost. Now, I know we've all got our own complaints, and I do as well, and our folks are out there where there's no shortage of traffic enforcement in our city. I can assure you that. But as a whole, and on the streets that we've studied, we don't have egregious speeders. When you see 279, for example, on Honeysuckle, I don't know if you have that one. I'm looking at a study from 279 over the speed limit on this particular day. 85% of those or more were within that couple of mile an hours over the speed limit. Areas that are within toleration levels. So just that, if that helps.
So, I guess one thing, as I looked at this data in I guess my first pass looking at it, in looking at the traffic counts, it drew my attention. In some of the big streets, for example, Northwest Military is going to have a high traffic count. But I looked at Gladiola, and I was a little surprised. And I looked at Antler because I was curious. I really want to see what Antler looked like because I know Antler's it's on the books to get worked on, which I'm hoping does continue. But Gladiola gets a lot of vehicles, and I'm wondering if there's any way to correlate that to the hard, because it's a shortcut, and they get to avoid that lack of turn lane at West Avenue and 410 as that backs up. And so I'm just kind of curious as a reason as to why, and then what we can do to help mitigate some of that incredible amount of traffic on Gladiola.
We've taken some efforts there already. Lieutenant Wagner was instrumental in getting a couple of things accomplished. First, we recognized that it was a high cut-through area. We use it as a cut-through as well when we're getting to JK Airport. I mean, it makes sense. It's a straight shot. You circumvent the lights and the traffic that backs up. When I say we use it as a cut-through, we don't have a purpose to go anywhere. So when we have a purpose to go somewhere, we're using it as a cut-through, right? Expedite response times. What we noticed, though, with the complaints that we fielded from Gladiola and residents in particular, is that typically the worst time is during the school year, as you can imagine with the high school drivers. If you've been on Jackson Keller, anytime around 2:45 till about 4:30, it's backed up all the way to Lee High School both directions, whether it's from Blanco Road or whether it's from 410. And so a lot of folks circumvent the 410 Jackson Keller light sequence there, Gladiola. What Lieutenant Wagner was successful at accomplishing was reaching out to, I don't think it was TxDOT, I think it was San Antonio operated traffic control devices there, the lights, and increasing the green light sequence just a little longer on the northbound side of Jackson Keller, our city side, if you will, through to 410 and increasing the 410 green light as well. And we've seen a decrease, at least the residents have reported a decrease. We haven't done a traffic study since due to some of the weather and some of the other conflicts with the radar trailer. But we hear that it's decreasing traffic. It appears to be a decrease in traffic. So to your question, to your point, John, we've taken some measures that seem to have been successful thus far. I know there were some initial requests or at least initial suggestions that maybe we consider speed bumps and some of these other things. You know that the stop sign went in at Gladiola and blew it, and that has helped a little bit. Now we get some reports of folks running it, but we worked there quite a bit, and it's not egregious as well. Speed bumps, I was telling Jack before the meeting that from our perspective, we're vehemently opposed to those because they slow down the emergency response time. And what I have seen in 17 years of doing this job is that folks make up time between the speed bumps. So you slow down to not rip off your undercarriage, and then you accelerate more than you normally would have to make up the time before the next speed bump. And that seems to be a true phenomenon with speed bumps everywhere. If you kind of just go and think about the logic behind it, and then if you go and observe it, it certainly has shown to be true in most cases for myself, working traffic or otherwise, in between speed bump zones. So there's some things that are working and have worked and decreased some stuff on Gladiola. Antler, similarly, we restricted parking, and that's gotten some of the younger drivers from Lee off of there. And I think Antler traffic is down somewhat. Who knows what it'll be like if that roads were fixed, then it becomes a little more pleasant to drive.
A race
We
track.
walk this razor's edge of taking care of our infrastructure and trying to ward off those that use it as a pass-through. And stay legal at the same time, right? Because there are restrictions that we have on us, levied upon us, in limiting folks' ability to drive through a public street.
Okay. Questions on this?
Sure. Chief, can you hear me now? Okay, great. The three streets that I'm most familiar with, Antler, Atwater, Herwick, those tend to be, at least during during school year, and sometimes during the summer as well too, about 2 or 3 hours, there is a lot of speeders that will take advantage of that straight shot through there. What's your opinion on doing like 4-way stop signs up and down Buckaroo? I'm still trying to puzzled over why the stop signs on Buckaroo are actually north-south instead of east-west, which would be the one that would kind of tend to slow things down a bit more. Do you think that might have any kind of improvement over what we currently are seeing?
I think stop signs have an improvement, sure. By and large, most folks follow the laws. Voluntary compliance is what we seek, and fortunately for us in this country, most folks follow the law. So sure, there is an impact that those stop signs will have. You know, here's what I don't have to caution you. I just let you know this. Most of the time, the violators, like we found on Honeysuckle at the Gladiola, when the stop signs are getting rammed, are city residents. And that's a fact. I mean, that's from study after study after study.
Okay.
So we have to not necessarily be careful or be cautious, but just be cognizant that we want enforcement, but then it's citizens of Castle Hills that end up usually being on the receiving end of that enforcement. And that's okay if they're violators, right? But it also will cause Councilman McCormick and his colleagues to field a few complaints, I'm sure. And you know, we don't do it if it ain't warranted, granted. But yes, I think it would. But that's certainly a council and a committee recommendation. Stop signs we prefer those over the speed bumps, obviously. We can mitigate a stop sign much better than we can a speed bump without tearing up the fleet. And still maintain a fair response time, an adequate response time, better than adequate response time. So that's something to consider, Mark.
So one of the things that I've observed is some of the speed bumps that I have seen, and this is just a civilian observation here, is that some of them have their construction in a fashion where it appears that a proper wheelbase or wheel width, you should be able to go ahead and slip through them. Same thing with a motorcycle. So with these particular style of speed bumps right here, are these any better, or are they just as bad, or it doesn't make sense? Talk a little bit about that as well.
Do you
Mark,
mind if I
I think-
ask a question? Are you talking about the speed humps that they've designed now that are more like
Yes,
4
sir.
feet or so?
They have like a slot between them, so they're constructed in like 3 different elements, where you have a left, right, and a center element, and then you have like I guess a wheel entryway, if you will.
There's slope down, Mark, at the end. It's kind of
Yes,
right there
sir.
before the other side slopes back up a little bit.
Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah, good
We
question.
all know the tricks to those. Straddle your vehicle, and you can minimize the impact of the speed hump.
You still have to kind of slow down for them a little bit.
A little bit.
The issue is that I have sat on my front porch and doing the kind of the amateur speed measuring thing here. I know how long it is between one part of my property and the other, and take a stopwatch, and I've timed people doing 40 and 50. Not a lot, but I've done from time to time, and eventually I see some kind of tragedy coming from this, because there are some folks. It might not be a lot of them, but to me, in my simple observation, there's enough that there is 40 and 50 miles an hour is fast enough where it doesn't seem like there's going to be a good outcome there. And my figures could be very well off. I mean, I'm not trying to say that mine's the end all know all there, but some of them are really coming through there like at a really, really high clip.
Perhaps so, yes, sir. I mean, as much as we'd like to be everywhere at one time, we can't. We usually have 2 officers on at a time, and we get them occasionally at those types of high speeds. Fortunately, it's not a major issue, but I get it. When you live on the street, it's a concern, and it's a concern of mine as well. But I think the stop signs at Buckaroo can mitigate some of that. Again, the speed humps, I would strongly consider researching those and their effectiveness, because in my experience, it's been people make up the speed between the speed humps. And then there's a deterrent, or at least a negative effect on the response for law enforcement.
So we just put in more speed humps.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed
No, I'm just kidding.
is that people tend to try to make up their speed between stop signs, too.
That's true.
I mean, on my street, not too many years ago, we put in stop signs down there at Banyan on Carrollwood, between the stoplight at the Military Highway and Lock Hill Selma. And people, it's easy to see. They haul buns from Lock Hill to the stop sign, and then haul buns from the stop sign to the stoplight, and the same going the other direction. So your comment about speed bumps applies equally to stop signs. The question, I guess, is how do you stop, or how do you at least slow down some people coming down using that cut-through? It's a legitimate cut-through, I buy that, but it's not legitimate to go 50 miles an hour between the stop signs.
Yes, sir. Agreed. Again, we enforce traffic where the complaints come in, and the squeaky wheel gets the grease, I guess. But we certainly try to set up on these areas that we know are problem areas, but we have we have several, and we'll call them problem areas, but, you know, Military, West Avenue, we got 60 and 70 mile an hour out here on Military Highway that I personally stopped a couple Saturdays ago. So, I mean, I can compare apples to apples on speeding and where it's egregious at. But we can only enforce as much as we can enforce. I mean, again, we'll gladly set up out there for a while, Mark, and rerun another traffic study. The current one that we have shows an average speed of 26 miles an hour on that street. So, you know, you take out a couple of those outliers, those anomalies, and for the most part, everybody's staying within the tolerations of the speed limit.
So another quick question before I step out and handle some business here real quick. I noticed that in like Alamo Heights, they have, when you go into the city, they'll have like 25 miles an hour is basically the
Standard.
The standard speed, unless it's stated otherwise, and then it's at 30. Do you believe that lowering our standard or nominal speed to 25, would that have any appreciable effect? Would that be useful at all?
Perhaps, sir, and that's a good point. Universal City, there's a few of them that have that prima facie lower speed limit, or lower prima facie. The issue with doing that is TxDOT restricts us in some regard. We have to meet a certain threshold before we can do that without, I want to word this correctly. Let's say if we're not at that threshold and we lower our speed limits, then we are required to submit audits and cumbersome paperwork.
So it's a hassle.
It's a hassle. Thank you, Mark. It's a hassle. I could have summarized it with that. It's a hassle unless we're past that threshold, and then we can lower our speed limits. Fortunately, I guess, depending on how you look at this, I think fortunately, we haven't passed that threshold, not demonstrating a reason to lower our speed limits. Not to say that they're, again, I agree with you. I know they're out there. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying we haven't reached that threshold, which is like 85% of the volume of traffic has to be going over a speed limit. And I forget what it is, but there's a threshold, and we haven't even come close to it. Now, that's not to say we can't lower it. We can. We just have to jump through a bunch of hoops. It's very cumbersome when you lower it, and then you've got to follow up with quarterly reports or annual reports and audits on why you lowered it, the numbers that you stopped there, your enforcement rates. I mean, a whole bunch of stuff when it really isn't warranted. And I get why they do that, right? If we lower a speed limit to 25, that's going to have an adverse effect somewhere in San Antonio, right? Whether it increases one more car to get in another queue or 100 more cars to get another queue. So all these things have an adverse effect, or in effect, I should say, not necessarily adverse, in effect somewhere else. Mm-hmm. It's, you know, laws of statistics, whatever you want to call it. You change traffic flow somewhere, you're going to have a problem somewhere else. And I think that's why they put those hoops on there, make it a little hassle, a little bit greater of a hassle to do that, Mark.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
So, Chief, I'm looking at some of the data. It was the 2017 data. I'm looking at Carrollwood and Moss, and there was another cut street that I saw too in there. Is that still a problem? I mean, my intuition says that problem hasn't gone away, but I'm asking you because you're much more involved in it, and then if it is, what can we do to help mitigate that, in your opinion?
I suppose. And good question, John. The first thing would be your definition of a problem. I don't see it as a problem necessarily because we're not getting the complaints. Okay. Now, I hope that's not because residents don't feel they can't complain to us, because they certainly can, and they'll get a response. I think we've showed that time and again. So I'm not getting calls that those are complaints. We have our complaints, but we don't have those particular complaints. You know, Bernard's come to us with complaints on East Castle, and we've addressed it and monitored it and put we've done some things, and sometimes we resign ourselves to, well, this is just going to be a necessary evil of living where I live.
What's the best way for a citizen to come forward with a complaint? What's the most optimal, you know, calling the phone number, showing up in person?
All of the above, Mark. We also provide an online form submittal slip. I mean, we've made it about as easy as it can possibly be. Hop on the city website and give us a complaint. You can stay anonymous if you wish to do so. Walk in. There's complaint forms in the lobby. You can talk to an officer. You can call. You can call my office. My card, I bet I'm on card number 2,000. Who knows how many I've given out in this city just by going around to folks and businesses alike. So a council member, certainly a good place to take a complaint. I prefer you just call me or reach out to one of our officers. At the lowest level is always the best place to handle any complaint, right? I mean, in my opinion. You know, so yeah, any of those, you bet, and we'll certainly respond to them.
What do you think about, I was looking at stuff, say on these residential streets, like cut-throughs, what if we put bike lanes bike lanes, but you don't have to call it a bike lane, but bring the cars closer together, so if there's traffic, they have to slow down because they don't want to hit the other car.
Intuitively, I got a response to that, but that's a better question for an engineer, probably more so than myself. My knee-jerk reaction to that would be, I think we create more hazard when we scrunch stuff in or create. I think
Because it's for that was I was thinking for the pedestrian, not for the car. So
yeah, but again, I don't know about the walkability stuff. I mean, as far as I like it. Bernie has a lot of it, and I enjoy that stuff. But the streets are wider, it seems, so they didn't force cars to pull mirrors in as you're going past each other.
Right.
And I know that's not what you mean.
yeah,
but-
no. I was thinking, so instead of speed bumps and stop signs, it's just another psychological way to
Absolutely.
slow people down. It's slowing them down is the thing. Yeah, you're still gonna have the traffic, but
Sure.
just slow them down a little. I just didn't know if you had any ideas.
No, again, when we do our studies, and we haven't studied every street, let me be fair about that. We've probably done 36 or so. How many do we have, John, total?
On the number of streets?
Yes,
So I did not count the number of streets, I'm sorry, but I'm seeing, yeah,
Well,
probably
I meant
30.
total in our city. Do you recall from when
Oh,
we were doing the cartograph and stuff?
Something less than 200. Something like one.
Well, it's unfortunately, it's all segmented, and so you take a street and you have like 13 segments in a street, and so.
And it's the same street,
It's
effectively.
the same street, because
Right.
you gotta look at it in segments as you're doing your PCI and OCI and all that fun stuff anyway, so. I don't, I'm sorry, I just not.
That's
I don't-
okay. I
gotta
was
look
going to
it
draw a
up, but-
comparison with how many we have studied and how many
Yeah, I
we
think it's
have.
like, we have 50-some streets in this city, if I recall right. Does that ring a bell
I
at
thought it
all?
was 70, but that could
Maybe
be
it's
right.
70, okay.
That could be right. Okay, so we've done about half, is what I was getting at. Maybe, I guess.
Maybe
if that's
70,
the
yeah,
case.
sounds better. With the cul-de-sacs and all that, yeah, okay.
That said, I would come back to this. I don't see that we have a true speeding problem. I know we have those folks out there that speed. I get it, and there's a lot of citations stacked up in there, as well as warnings to seek voluntary compliance in the court, in the courts. And our guys are out there now working step program and running traffic, and they do it throughout the city, not just in hot spots but certainly the hot spots get the attention. I think our bigger concern is going to be San Antonio's growth rate and the continued use of the artery streets, the arterial streets that are the commuter streets. Jack and I were talking about that briefly beforehand, and I bet if we were to do another study now on military, it's greater than what it was in 2010. And let me say this, of 33 suburbs, I think there's 33 of San Antonio, 27, 33 policing agencies. Of all the suburbs of San Antonio, we have the highest traffic volume, somewhere bordering around 300,000 plus on a day, any given day during the week. We have a lot of cars here, period. I mean, it's just our geographic location of San Antonio, the portion of 410 that we have, and West Avenue and Military as major commuter streets.
That includes the traffic on 410, that 300,000 number?
Yeah, I believe it does, sir. Yes, sir. I
As
know.
I
it
recall, TxDOT says that traffic volumes around 295,000 a
That's
day,
right.
which leaves us about 5,000 for the rest of the city.
So we're well over the 300. Yeah, we're well over the 300,000 threshold, and only going to go higher when you think that the greatest corridor growth area in Texas is the I-10 to 281 and just north of San Antonio. In other words, Military Highway, and everything that feeds that, 46, Blanco, all that stuff that goes out and feeds in. So I think we've got some concerns there. As it stands, speeding is not a major concern. Now, it's a concern with safety and some of these, I get that. But the amount of speeders, let me word it that way, the amount of speeders that we're seeing with our traffic studies has not risen to an egregious level.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your information. I think there are a lot of topics we need to move on with.
I concur, thank you, Skip. Chief, thank you for your impromptu information, so and I know it's kind of
Anytime,
short.
anything else, you guys, you have cell
Okay.
phones, emails,
Okay.
happy to help.
We'll
you. Thank
worry
you,
about it just as hard as we can, Chief.
All right, again.
Can I
Thank you, Chief.
go back a second to
Sure, go ahead,
Tiger
Skip.
before she decides to gets bored and leaves?
Okay.
Jeannie? Okay, well, that's fine. I was going to ask you about, we had some discussion on the walkability issues, and you were talking about not cutting down traffic flow, but we've had some issues brought up about possible crosswalks across West Avenue and/or Northwest Military between Carrollwood and West, and between West and 410. And I wondered if you've looked at that and how that would how that would be received if we propose to do it, and what involvement you think the MPO might have if we sought to put in a crosswalk between Northwest Military, Northwest Military between Carrollwood and West Avenue, and on West between 410 and Northwest Military.
Well, TxDOT is the owner of Northwest Military, right, still?
Right?
Yes.
So you'd have to work with TxDOT to put crosswalks. What they might be amenable, I mean, and you can, technically, you can put crosswalks wherever there's an intersection. I mean, you don't want people crossing mid-block because that's safe, but technically, you put crosswalks at.
Ms. Geiger, may I ask, I want to jump, because I observe people walking across Northwest Military more often than not,
And
unfortunately.
that brings me to my next point, that crosswalks may not be the thing, but one of the big items these days are pedestrian refuge islands that would be placed within the center left turn lane. So that center left turn lane would be broken up, and these pedestrian refuge islands would be placed periodically throughout that turn lane. And that way, people don't have to walk the entire length all at one time. They can walk, cross the 2 lanes, get to the island, and then cross again. And that does provide, considerably more safety than people just being left, stranded in the middle of military.
May I comment on that? What I'm seeing is I'm seeing people going, it looks like they're going to the bus stops. They're going from one side of Northwest Military to catch the bus stop on the other side of Northwest Military. And there is no, they're not on a street corner. There's no, a lot of the streets on Northwest Military are kind of, they don't necessarily go, yeah, they're offset. And so it's very hard to run a crosswalk across some of that. And it may, I don't know if there's some sort of violation if you do a crosswalk mid, in the center between the blocks or not. But this is what I am observing, and I don't have confirmation, but it's unsettling to be coming down Northwest Military and seeing a person, dart across the street in front of you, even if you're going only 35 miles an hour, which I do. But it's unsettling to see that, and it's dangerous to see that. And they're going across. A lot of them are going. I've seen them going to bus stops. So
The good news is that the speed limit on military is so low that, it's not like it's a 45 or 50 mile an hour speed limit. It is only 35. So that does help with the safety for pedestrians and cyclists to have a speed that low on that major of a facility.
But the problem is you cannot, if you look at Carrollwood to West Avenue, that's almost a mile, and close to it maybe?
Close to a mile.
Or you can't get across, as a pedestrian, cannot get across Northwest Military.
Well, that's why I'm suggesting the refuge islands so you still allow the left turns at the cross streets or maybe every other cross street. So maybe a vehicle has to go up, do a U-turn to come back. But those islands just, another good example is Fredericksburg Road. Expecting people to cross 7 lanes of traffic, that's ridiculous.
Right.
But I think TxDOT would be amenable to talking about,
Okay. Well-
several well-thought-out spots of refuge islands within that center left turn lane.
And that's a great idea. And what I don't want is I don't want to encourage people to illegally walk across Northwest Military, which you really don't want to. I mean, you want to provide some sort of safety, but you don't want to encourage the kind of behavior. But then again, what choice do you have? I'm not going to walk a mile up or over, or half a mile up and over.
But if you can tie them to the bus stop locations, I mean, it makes sense.
It does. It does. So.
Yes.
So, great point to bring up, Skip.
Okay. Thanks very much. I didn't mean to interrupt your flow of traffic there.
Oh no.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Ryan, are they planning something like that on West Avenue by Antonian via putting in a refuge? Okay. Yeah. refuge, yeah. Okay.
So one of the things that I've observed when dropping off my son at school, he goes to the Christian school there at Castle Hills, between West and, can't name the name of the street that is the southern border of the Boy Scout
Winston.
property. Is it Winston?
Mhm.
Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of folks that are crossing Northwest Military there. A lot of students are doing that. And I don't know, is there something that we could do to help with that as well? I haven't really noticed a lot of people trying to cross between West and Carrollwood, but I haven't really been paying attention. Most of it's been close to the school, where I've noticed there's a lot of folks trying to go and cross the streets.
If I may, I'm going to go ahead and ask that we move on in the agenda, because actually these are some of the new ideas that you're throwing out there, and so I'd like to go ahead and move to agenda item number 5, and that's basically discuss the ideas, accept any input from the public. I'm not going to read this whole thing on here if that's okay. And so we do have a public present that has provided some wonderful information, and I'm going to ask if there's any ideas that you may want to present to us that we consider, Ms. Geiger, and then I'll open it up to this committee to go ahead and bring forth some ideas, or additional ideas, I'm sorry.
The MPO offers other different programs besides just funding roadway projects. And one of those is we do walkable community workshops, and it works really well in smaller cities like this and also neighborhoods. And I know we did one Sunday when the farmers market used to be there at Military and West Avenue. But I don't know if it was very well publicized and if it was resident related or more related to the church there. But we do offer walkable community workshops. We offer street skills classes for mature teens and adults that are want to get back to riding bikes and safe cycling, riding on the street. We also offer safety classes, and if you have a contact, at the school there, the church school, the big one, Baptist one, be happy to take a name and do pedestrian safety skills classes at some of these, I guess particularly the schools. I think that would be really good if they were interested. The point is, we're not just about funding projects. We do a whole bunch of other things. We do bike rodeos, a lot of safety-related opportunities that we offer cities and neighborhoods. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Who would you contact for, like, say, the Christian school, if we want to ask the MPO to?
We're very small. Anything,
Okay.
You could send anything to me, and
Okay.
I will get it to the right person.
Oh, nice.
No doubt about that. There's only 17 of us on
Mhm.
the committee.
Perfect.
But
That's, education's
I'm over
good.
most of the people that do that anyway, so it's just sending out.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Do we have your card, or is
Yeah.
your information?
I have extra. I have others if
Okay.
Perfect.
you like them.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Geiger. Okay, so I'm going to open this up to the committee here. I'm going to recap some of the ideas that, as I recall them. Skip, if you want to take them, I know you took some good notes on that too. Either way, or you want to supplement me on the ones that I missed would be fine also. But I know we talked about considering a Parks and, I guess it was Parks and Recreation, if I recall right, and I think that's an agenda item that I'd like to discuss later, because Skip put some work into that. I know, Bernard, you brought up about setting up some parks and utilizing some, the school and following up with that. Actually, Castle Elementary School, I'm sorry, at this point. Then we also have the ideas of some pocket parks in the community. I know Ms. Martin brought that forward, and that was again another idea. The congestion at West Avenue, obviously we've been talking about that, and that has some really good meat in it to move forward on. Sidewalks, on Lock Hill Selma from West Avenue to Blanco. We also talked about fitness equipment for the park that was, I guess, tied into Castles Elementary. And stop signs on Buckaroo was another item, and we talked about about speed humps as another item. I'm sure I missed some items. Skip, would anyone like to help supplement that of where we're at today or add any new items to it?
There's a long list of things that we've looked at and considered. As you know, Mr. Hudemeyer has had a good deal of exercise in building a relationship with the school. He's on the PTA and active in schoolwork over there, and has been active in pursuing the Sparks Park project with the NEISD. And it looks like that project is going to go with Castle Hills Elementary. Talking to Ron Cleary, who is the NEISD rep that handles the Sparks project, with Mr. Hudemeyer yesterday, it looks like that project's going to go. And we'd considered having, when we discussed the parks in the first place, 3 possible parks. And so the south end park looks like it might be possible to pursue a relationship with the Jackson Keller Elementary School, which is in Castle Hill city limits. I have gone and taken a look at the playground over there, and I'd say that from most points of view, I'd say it's almost non-existent. They have a soccer field which is not marked. They have goals at each end of an open space that looks like a piece of the Great Chihuahuan Desert. And they have an asphalt flat that's marked out for a basketball court and a couple of tennis courts. And then they have a covered area which has some little play area inside it, but that's about it. They have a sizable amount of land, but no real playground area. And I'm informed that the PTA over there is not very active. The school doesn't have a lot of money. And so if there's something to be done there, the potential exists, but coming up with the funds for it may be a little bit of a problem. The school indicates they're interested in doing this. Mr. Cleary was very generous with the possibility of school funds for Castle Hills Elementary. But I'd like to pursue the one on the south side for the people inside Loop 410, and that one looks like it is one that might be available to pursue when we get further along in that direction.
Okay.
Yes, that's it. And I think Mr. Clary would probably be the perfect person to, because he wants to open up, or I think he has instructions to open up all the schools, the playgrounds to all NEISD schools after school and on breaks to the public. So it's a good direction for the communities. And like you said, we can try to find funds for them, grants and stuff, help them with playground equipment or exercise equipment, something where it's not, the funds are already out there, we just have to find them and direct them to those funds.
Well, one approach, since I know we have some general funds still available this year in the city budget, is to instead of using that funds for playground equipment, we might be able to use it for sidewalks or access, and take that expense off the school system and let them put their money toward playground equipment.
That sounds good.
That's just something to consider down the way. And by the way, Mr. Hudemeyer has done all of the dirty work on getting this done with Castle Hills. The only thing really that remains to be done is for us to take the credit.
It's fine with me.
Oh, Bernard, thank you for all your effort on that too. And so back to additional ideas. I'd like to go ahead and start. Let's see with Mark, if you have anything you'd like to add additionally as far as additional ideas at this point, and not that we're precluding it from the future, but.
I think, yeah, the ideas that I've already come up with, those pretty much, those are the major ones I can think of right off the top of my head.
Okay.
And like I said, I'll just go with those for now.
Okay, great, thank you. Mark? Bernard?
I was telling the chief about just using markings on the road to slow traffic psychologically.
Okay,
So that's I would like to, I mean, maybe we could just do one street, a cut-through street, see how it works, see if the residents feel like their traffic is more cognizant of them,
Perhaps additional signage, just simple signage saying, pedestrian usage or, slow down pedestrians or something like that. Maybe not legal signs, but things that are just kind of reminders that there are children here.
Right.
And there are folks that are using it, as part of their normal life.
Right. So it's just to slow down, that you're not, taking away the traffic, but just to make them think a little bit. So that's one of the things we can think about doing.
I think that's a really good point, Bernard, if I may interject here. Because I know we live on the south side of 410, and we've seen a lot more younger families moving in, a lot more baby carriages and wives and joggers and things like that. I think the older folks, not meaning any disrespect, but I think they're moving on and moving out, and they're being replaced by younger families with kids, which is great. So I think we should be cognizant, and I think those kind of ideas that you guys are talking about make a lot of sense in that respect. But I think we should keep that in mind moving forward. I don't know if we need MPO funds to
Right.
put stop signs in or, other type of signs, but
What kind of trouble is it to go ahead and actually create a new stop? I mean, as opposed for like Buckaroo, and the chief seems to think that it would be something that might be helpful. How would we even start that process right there to go ahead and get stop signs in? I mean, there would be 3 different places that we'd want to go ahead and put on.
you need the data to support it, I guess, and if there's anything, you get that from the chief, and then you would submit that to a council member. Anybody in mind here?
Hi there,
Get it
Frank.
with you,
Yes.
Skip. And then it has to be a council action
So
to
it's
go
a
ahead.
council action, then, okay.
Right, because you're to install that for them to approve and debate and install the stop signs.
Okay,
or
gotcha.
Whatever signs, and that kind, so I'd move it through Skip at that point, if that makes sense. Skip, I hope I'm correct on that. That would come through somebody of your stature to move something like that forward.
Somebody in my staff?
Stature.
Oh, okay.
Position.
I'm sorry.
Staff of one, I know, we're on that
Staff of one.
staff, so.
I think the police department has funds available to do some of that, and that's something we just have to check with Chief Siemens when we decide what streets we think would be appropriate, and I think that would be coordinated through him anyway.
Agreed.
I'm assuming the Buckaroo and all those 3 intersections there that run into it are not the only place in town that would do well with an additional
benefit.
4-way stop sign.
And we may
Perhaps
actually
something along
consider.
West Road, I don't know.
We may consider as an option too, I think be part of the debate, is instead of a stop sign, maybe a yield sign too. Those do have a good impact. I have a yield sign on my street, and I follow it, and I look, but I do a roll and go most of the time. So it's a little more efficient in that regard. But, the safety side, I guess that would have to be part of the debate, and that's so.
Certainly it would cause people to slow down, tap the brake. That's really what, at least that's and that's near and dear to me, obviously, is have people to, tap the brake there.
Right,
And-
absolutely. Jack, you have any ideas that you'd like to bring forward?
The only thing going through my mind, John, I think there's a lot of great ideas on the table. With respect to the West Avenue Jackson Keller thing, I wonder if there's any opportunity to actually make Jackson Keller a 4-lane road, which might help the Jackson Keller end of it, but you still, I think, wind up with a big bottleneck when you get to West Avenue, because it's 4 lanes going to 410, and that's not enough. I don't know if that could be a 6-lane deal, if that would help, or some sort of rethinking of that intersection to try to relieve that congestion.
I find Jackson Keller to be pretty confusing to drive along. When does 2 lanes start and 1 lane
It
stop?
does.
And
Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah,
meanders back in and
yeah,
out as you
then
go and
people
everything.
kind of do the the merge dance there, where you take your life into your own hands if you're not careful. So.
Okay, Jack, thank you for that.
Oh, you're
So,
welcome, John.
Skip, I'd love any other ideas, but also if you may, I know you put together an agenda item for council that may be appropriate this time, and that may be appropriate at the end, but I think it needs to be touched on if that's reasonable.
I'm sorry, tell me that again.
You put together a agenda item for council to be heard at council,
Yes,
and that was per our direction previously, and that
Yes.
as one of the ideas as far as the Parks Commission.
yes. And are you looking at item one of old business then?
Well, it does go down to, I guess, it's not specifically called out here, but I guess that would be item number 1.
Yeah.
If you can, anything else on item number 5 on new business, if not, I'd like to move to item number 1 in that regard, so yes.
Okay. Then I assume we're going to move to item one of old business.
Okay. All right,
Okay.
thank you, Skip.
I've passed out to everybody a copy of the council agenda summary sheet and the proposed ordinance that would create a Parks Commission for Castle Hills. And this was based on the recommendation that we agreed on last time around. I'm passing this around because there are a couple of things on here that I changed, or one thing anyway that is significant. And when we voted on this, we said that we would act as interim Parks Commission, as I recall it. And when I got to thinking about this and talking over with the city attorney, there's really not much difference between interim and full-time, and we never said anything about which was going to be which. And if somebody wants to get out, there's nothing that prevents you from resigning for personal reasons or take care of business or whatever happens to come up. So what we've done is to ask the council to change the Code of Ordinances in Castle Hills to add to Chapter 30, Parks and Recreation, the creation of a Parks Commission. You can see it in the ordinance here. Chapter 1, there should be a Castle Hills Parks Commission consisting of 3 or more members appointed by the City Council for 2-year terms. We're not calling it an interim council at the moment, an interim commission at the moment. And then the commission is free to elect its own officers who will serve for 1-year terms. The Section 30.2, duties of the Parks Commission include preparation of a park inventory of existing parks, preparation of a plan for future parks, both to be updated annually. The Parks Commission is encouraged to seek out and with council approval apply for any grants or other funding that might benefit the city parks program. And the Parks Commission is authorized to explore and negotiate regarding future park projects and joint use projects. All proposed agreements and expenditures will be submitted to the City Council for final review and approval. Now, if there's heartburn about the interim parks idea, whether there's a significant difference in your mind, it's possible that I can move to amend this at council if that's the sense of our group here. So I'm asking for your approval to go ahead with this as it's written. If you have a change that you'd like to make, or that you want me to present to council at the time, now's the time to bring it up.
Skip, I will comment in regards to your idea. I think it makes sense, and I guess the interim was my idea to allow this idea to gel, and I think after you've had some counsel on that, I believe that's the proper way to go forward. So I applaud you doing that.
Okay.
So I'm in favor of it. Have one little typo, if you may. I don't have an S at the end of my
Somebody's
name.
always nitpicking my
you may.
typing.
I get this a lot, so it's okay. If my last name could be changed to Squire, I would certainly appreciate that. On the last page, or page 2 of 2
I thought I'd gotten all of those.
on the actual ordinance that's being proposed. Strike the S off the end of my name.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you. Mark?
I agree. I think that I don't see a problem with being, if my understanding of what's happening here is that we would be a designated interim committee for such a period of time, that I have no problem with that then at
We'd
all.
serve for 2 years, and we will not be interim anymore. We'll be an actual Parks
okay.
Commission.
I agree with that, so I think it's a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah,
Bernard?
I think for the city, I mean, it's a great asset to have a parks committee. I mean, so I think it should go through the proper channels and, through council and be official,
Exactly what Skip's doing.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Okay, Jack?
Thank you, Skip.
Well, I think it's a great idea. My only question is that we might talk about is that going to have any impact on our duties as the MPO ad hoc committee? Because, I mean, the park, I mean, certainly they integrate nicely together, I think. But as long as it doesn't take away time from this.
I'm anticipating it's not going to take away very much time. I think that once we get started, the parks are pretty much static. They're not going to go anywhere. They're not going to be changing around a whole bunch.
Well, not much, but if we explore new ideas like the Boy Scout camp or something like that,
Yeah.
could involve some time.
It could involve some time.
And I'm not objecting, I just want to sort of be realistic about it and say, okay, guys.
I think it's certainly healthy for us perhaps on a regular basis to kind of self-reflect and say, hey, are we executing properly? Are we giving everything that we possibly can for both these particular jobs right here? And if there's something wrong, then we can be the ones to go ahead and make that proper correction right there and make the recommendations to the council. Say, hey, we're overburdened, or we're not focusing correctly on the particular subjects that we believe are most important, and take it from there and let our
Yeah.
representative there go ahead and do the
I think
proper
that's,
thing.
I think that's possible. We can ask for other people to be appointed. If it becomes a burden for one of us or more of us, we can resign and seek to have somebody else replace us. What I envisioned was that we would meet immediately following this committee meeting for a fairly short period of time to cover one or two items, because I don't think there's going to be a whole bunch. What will involve time will be the negotiating time individually with a school or some other entity who might have to reach out to others. The time that Bernard has already spent working on this outside of committee time. And as you can see, he's done all the work. And like I say, we get to take some credit for it, which is always good, but as long as that's possible and we can work individually outside the council, then I think we can do a good deal of work.
So in this particular recommendation of the council, it'll be just basically 3 or more people. Would there be like any rooms for alternates or something like that that might be helpful? I don't know, is that?
Well, one of the things about requiring the commission to be only 3 or more people is that, and with the 7 of us on it, and we can drop down like we have in this committee on occasion to 4 people. We have a quorum, and we can proceed with 4 people, with 3 people absent. And so that gives us a good deal of flexibility, I think.
So my question is, you answered my question in regards to meeting, and we can hold them jointly, which, or
Hold them one after
sequentially, I
the
guess,
other.
at that point, and
One
so-
after the other.
After the other, right, and you answered my question there. The only thought I would have is reaching out to the other 2 members of this committee to get their buy-in on it also before presenting that. That may have happened already. I'm not sure if discussions has had, Skip. I mean, you probably know more, or at this point.
Well, I have already reached out about the appointment to those who weren't here on that day.
Okay.
And I'll call Tanya and Robert again and ask them about it before I present it.
Wonderful.
But if it's appropriate at this time, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to accept these as our recommendation, this agenda and proposed ordinance as our recommendation to the council, because it's already on the council's agenda,
Okay.
but it can be
Agreed.
pulled.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Do we have any discussion? Any additional discussion on this item?
No more.
Okay. Call for the vote. All in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you, Skip. Thank you for putting this together. Okay. Old business, item number 2, discuss current status of previously approved and pending projects. We have discussed a lot of them already, and I'd like to go ahead and open that up. Skip, any discussion on any items that we have or previously approved?
No, the 2 that I asked Jeannie about earlier, I think she's already addressed. The reason that I thought those had been approved was, and I read through the last year of your minutes from the policy board and the technical board. And do have to say that sometimes finding the information in the minutes when and the agenda, when the minutes and when the agenda consists of 300 or 400 pages has not been easy. So I found only one chart that showed these two as pending, and I assumed and pending unfunded. And I assumed that meant that they had been approved and not funded. But since they were not approved, then that puts a little bit different color on those two. So as far as I know, then we don't really have any pending other than the Parks project.
Agreed. Thank you, Skip. Jack?
The only comment I have has to do, and I'm not even sure this is the right time, John, so forgive me if it's not. But I'm wondering, we're certainly very grateful to Ms. Geiger for giving her time this morning, but it sure would be nice if we had more input from the community. I'm wondering if we need to be a little bit more assertive about taking that on ourselves, and I'd be willing to host things in my home or something like that. Maybe invite some of the folks from our immediate area into our homes, or whatever. But in some fashion, be a little bit more aggressive about reaching out to the community, because it needs to be more than us, in my opinion.
You know, we had a nice compliment last time here from the one person who did show up about how well we did, and perhaps I can be the person to go ahead and advertise on nextdoor.com and just kind of keep on pushing that out there to go, hey, show up, let's talk about this, let's get people involved, and that sort of thing. Perhaps from an electronic perspective or a Facebook / whatever perspective. I think that I can do the Nextdoor part, but I think Facebook and Twitter will have to come from the city itself, and that might be something that our council member here could do, is to encourage the folks here in the city to constantly, every couple of days, hey, this is going to happen on Saturday, November blah, for us to go ahead and show up here at 10 o'clock or whatever. I think we make one announcement 2 weeks ahead of time. 3 days later, they've forgotten already. At least that it is with me. And so we might have to go and do this on a continuous basis here to go ahead and encourage folks to show up.
Right. Multiple announcements make a lot of good sense in that regard. So are the reminders of the announcements. I agree.
We don't have to make it, we don't have to make it book length. I mean, just 2 or 3 sentences and say, hey, show up. This is important stuff. Talk to us.
I'd say that in the past, I used to do the People's Law School over at St. Mary's. And the most effective means of getting people to attend was to feed them.
Do we
at least
have
today,
a
a hot
budget
cup of
for
coffee or
coffee and
something,
donuts?
right?
Sir?
Do we have a budget for coffee and donuts?
Well, the option, I guess, would be to see if there's any funding that Mr. Rampley might have access to that can get us coffee and donuts or something for the meeting. Not that I need any, because I don't certainly, but if we can.
If I need to, I have no problem stopping by and picking up a dozen kolaches here on my bill and and bring it over here and say, hey, you want some kolaches and coffee? I think the city can show up with a coffee machine.
Kolache and coffee time would be a nice option, and you can get the mini kolaches and they go further.
If feeding is what we need to do, then that's
Right.
let's do it.
Well, we can certainly try it, but we do have to advertise it too.
Right. So the advertisement, so Skip, you'll work within the city, and then Mark, you'll take a Nextdoor and throw that out there a couple of times to understand it? Okay, one.
I can do Nextdoor. Obviously, I have no direct influence on what's going to come out on the Twitter or Facebook feeds here for the city itself.
Right. Okay, great, thank you.
And I think it should be a couple of sentences saying, hey, kolache and coffee, show up.
Okay, Jack? Anything else? Okay, great. Bernard? Okay. Mark, anything else?
No, sir, I think that's
Okay,
it.
okay, great, thank you. Okay, item number 3, work session on previous project concepts, including congestion, drainage, walkability, and others. Committee members may identify projects in which they prefer to work on for the committee. I think this item is on here to go ahead and get us to start tasking us to do some stuff, if I'm reading this properly, which is very appropriate. So I'd like to start this off, if we would. I mean, we're taking on some tasks. Mark, you just took on doing some of the advertising, which I certainly appreciate. Bernard, you've been heavily involved, obviously, in the park, and I assume you will continue that. Is that reasonable?
Yes, it's fun for me, so it's.
Okay.
getting people out and getting the community together is, I don't know, I like it. I like talking to people, so it's good. I get to dress up sometimes.
Wonderful.
Don't get in the habit of doing that
Yeah, I
too
know.
often.
Okay, so we have, I don't want to try to assign anything here. I'm just kind of looking over the impromptu list that I put together. Jack, is there any of these items that we brought up that you wouldn't mind taking a lead
Yeah,
on?
I'm interested in the drainage end of things, John.
Okay,
You know, I think that's important. I'm a little worried after we learned today that it's only a peripheral part of the MPO funding. But I don't know, maybe there's a way we can do it. But yes, drainage is what I would like to participate in.
okay.
It sounded like, I mean, again, my interpretation of what I heard is that, at least from the federal perspective or from the funding, that we might be able to get 15% of those
Right.
things there to be able to apply toward.
Right,
flooding.
50% of a larger transportation project. Yeah, okay.
I'm catching up my notes here, so bear with me. Okay. Okay, the West Avenue intersection, and it highly intrigues me, and I think it would be a huge benefit to the city. I think that's maybe we need to move, obviously on a committee for that, move forward on the committee, but being that would involve us potentially via, potentially city staff, the engineers, and if there, it sounds like there's an opportunity. Sorry, hold on here. Okay, sounds like there's an opportunity for funding. It's going to come up relatively soon. It'll be here before we know it. I think that may be a kind of a higher priority item. If we're looking at a December, if I recall, December 12th or 15th timeframe when it's released or let out, and April, the plan will be due in April, if I recall right. December 12th it's let out, and it's due April 1st. Okay. My dates are not quite right, but thank you for helping. April Fool, there you go. I wouldn't mind taking that on. I would ask, I think it would be appropriate to get, since that is such a large item, Skip, if you'd be available, I'd love the opportunity to work with you on that and
Sure,
move
and
forward.
Mr. Rapley has a program underway, the CIP with regard to streets and drainage, I think, has been written, hasn't it, Mr. Rapley? So I think that's a good place to look for what the city has planned on drainage items at least. Jack, as far as the West Avenue project, yeah, I'll be happy to work with you on that. I've already done some work on Google Earth to get layouts and whatnot that are useful.
Wonderful. Skip, is there any other items that you'd like to, of the project list that we've talked about that you have a desire to move forward on?
I think working on the West Avenue project is a good place to start, and then the second one would be the Jackson Keller Middle School Park.
Say again, please?
The Jackson Keller Grade School Park.
Okay, thank you.
Should we actually formalize those as priorities and vote on them, or is this just something that we're going to?
I think at this point, we need, go ahead.
If you're going to talk to the city of San Antonio about the West Avenue Jackson Keller intersection, is that what I heard? That you also talk to them about the Jackson Keller Blanco intersection there at Nimitz, and then the entirety of Jackson Keller, because the city's going to start working on their 2022 block program before too long. So start talking to them early and try to get that in the mix and partner where you can.
That's what I think Jack was kind of alluding to, is like changing up the structure of Jackson Keller, you know.
Bring in that other intersection too, because it used to have 3 right turn lanes way back in the day, but it took those away and it really restricted the movement.
And that is the, what area? Jackson Keller Nimitz area?
Jackson Keller and Blanco.
Blanco.
Okay, all right. Oh, Jackson Keller Blanco.
Right there with the Valero
And you're talking essentially from Blanco on Jackson Keller to West Avenue, or correction, to Fort, well,
The 410.
yeah, essentially to 410, I guess, correct? Okay, or at least to West Avenue, I'm guessing.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Does the city, does it extend to Jackson Keller and 410, or does it stop there at West and 410? Have that little triangle there, are we,
Yeah, the city extends to Jackson Keller.
the Jackson Keller, okay.
Yeah, so the
The little-
restaurant, the gas station that are on the other side.
Pawn
the
shop,
other
that's
side,
all that's, okay.
That's all within the city's domain, yes.
Yeah, that little triangle belongs to the city.
Okay, wonderful. Skip, anything more on that?
No,
Okay, great, thank you.
I guess that's about it.
Okay, item number 4, any announcements that members would like to make? And I'll start on my left.
No announcements, other than, I guess, I'll be taking care of the kolaches next week. I'd like to have somebody else help me with the coffee. I'm not sure how I can do that. I'm assuming the city has some way to go ahead and do that, but I don't know.
I think they have coffee machines, don't you? The coffee makers? I can bring the coffee.
There's the perk machines they have here, so.
You'll bring the coffee?
I'll bring coffee.
Okay, I'll bring the kolaches in. I just want to go ahead and make sure that we weren't going to have one without the other.
Okay.
That's it. I'm going to go ahead and announce that and bring a couple dozen, and hopefully they'll all be eaten.
Okay. If not, we'll be full.
That's right.
Okay. Bernard?
I think we had a very good meeting yesterday with Mr. Clary at NEISD and the principal and of Castle Hills Elementary with our city manager, Mr. Rapley, and Skip. And it was just a very good, encouraging place to be for our community, because they want to help, I guess, build a stronger community. So it's very, very encouraging. So let everybody know.
Thank you. Jack?
Nothing here.
Okay, great, thank you, Jack. Skip?
I don't really have any announcements. We do need to select a time of the next meeting, otherwise we'll be meeting on Thanksgiving weekend, I think.
Okay. I'll make one announcement, then we'll move forward to that item. So,
Okay.
I had the opportunity to attend yesterday the coffee with the city manager, and also with the I guess the senior staff and other staff, and I was very impressed. Ryan, I want to thank you for the information you presented, the CIP that you're working on. I'm looking forward to seeing that, and then also your idea of what true leadership is, and how to lead employees, and your job function in that regard and stuff. So it was enlightening, and I certainly appreciate you working with the community to set that up. And I again grateful that I was able to be there, and grateful to hear the information that I heard, and I'd love to see that process continue. So, and I would encourage all citizens to try to be involved in that process. So that's the only announcement I have at this point. Next item is date and time of the next meeting. I think we were 2 weeks from the last meeting. That would put us, if we did this under 2 weeks, that would put us on the 24th, which is the end of, I guess, the end of Thanksgiving, if I'm in the Thanksgiving weekend, if I'm correct on that. And I would find that somewhat challenging myself. I propose that maybe we look at December 1st as the next committee meeting. A discussion on that.
I can't make that one.
Okay, correct. You mentioned that. Then that would put the next one at, I believe, would be when? December, if I recall right, that would be December 8th. If we're accommodating Mark can't be in there. Any thoughts from the members here?
No kolaches if
You're not there?
That's right.
That is true. So.
No, December 8th is fine in my end.
Okay, and I'm open on December 8th also. Skip, that does put us well, that's basically a month away from this meeting that we're having today. I always like to, I believe in momentum and trying to keep moving things forward, and a month is probably at the limit of that, in my opinion. And so, Any discussion? Skip, any thoughts on that regard?
No, I think probably December 8th is the most practical at this point. There's nothing that prevents this committee from meeting in groups of 3 to work on a project, because that is not a quorum and doesn't violate the rule against perpetuities or whatever it is that the state has, the Open Meetings Act. So I think we could probably go to December the 8th, and we could work on projects between here and there.
Okay.
If you want to get together on the West Avenue, Jackson Keller,
Absolutely.
yeah, we can spend some time on that. If somebody else wants to work with us, we can still have somebody else come in to
Absolutely.
participate if they want to.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, so I propose our next meeting will be at 10 a.m. Saturday, December 8th, I believe in council chambers. I would also propose, I like more of a, this is a personal thing. I like more of a meeting that's kind of more of a roundtable type meeting. The dais is functional here, but as we have more members in here, I would ask that we move to the tables and be able more face-to-face, so we have better sort of, I'm going back and forth all the time here, but we have more dialogue among everybody here too. If anybody has any objections, I'd like to move the meeting to those tables going forward, if that's okay.
We can certainly give it a try. I think the issue is going to be the microphones.
Right, and that's why we can work on that ahead of time. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but I'd like to try it if that's okay.
And probably that December the 8th, if the council approves our recommendation, we will suddenly materialize as the Parks Commission. And so that will probably be our first Parks Commission meeting also.
Absolutely, so, okay, so all in favor of December 8th, next meeting December 8th, 2018, okay, it's unanimous? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?